Hey guys, have you heard of Goldbelly? It's this amazing site where they ship the most iconic, famous foods from restaurants across the country, anywhere, nationwide. I've never found a more perfect gift than food. Goldbelly ships Chicago deep dish pizza, New York bagels, Maine lobster rolls, and even Ina Garden's famous cakes. So, if you're looking for a gift for the food lover in your life, head to goldbelly.com and get 20% off your first order with promo code GIFT. That's goldbelly.com, promo code GIFT.
I've got good news and bad news. Here's the bad news. Most protein bars are packed with sugar and unpronounceable ingredients. The good news? There's a better option. I'm Will, and I created IQ Bar plant protein bars to empower doers like you with clean, delicious, low-sugar brain and body fuel. IQ bars are packed with 12 grams of protein, brain nutrients like magnesium and lion's mane, and zero weird stuff. And right now, you can get 20% off all IQ Bar products plus free shipping. Try our delicious IQ Bar sampler pack with 7 plant protein bars, 4 hydration mixes, and 4 enhanced coffee sticks. Clean ingredients, amazing taste, and you'll love how you feel. Refuel smarter, hydrate harder, caffeinate larger with IQ Bar.
Go to eatiqbar.com and enter code BAR20 to get 20% off all IQ Bar products plus free shipping. Again, go to eatiqbar.com and enter code BAR20.
Back to the Bigfoot Manifesto, where progressive politics, cryptids, and the myths we tell about the future all gather around the same campfire. Today's question: if AI is so powerful, why isn't it replacing CEOs? We're told artificial intelligence is about to eliminate drivers, writers, coders, designers, warehouse workers, maybe even teachers, but somehow never hedge fund managers, never private equity executives, never the C-suite. That's not a glitch. That's a design. Our guest is Marx, tech journalist and critic who has been dissecting Silicon Valley hype for years. So welcome to the Bigfoot Manifesto, Paris. Thanks for coming on. I really appreciate it. As I've told you off screen, I'm a huge fan. I really enjoy your writing. I think it's great. And I also love on your site, I want to make a quick note of this because I'm going to put some of your information up, but I love how you recommend reading. I found some great books in there. And that's one of my favorite parts that you put up is recommended reading for other authors. Excellent stuff in there. I'll have links to all of his writings, his book recommendations, podcast, everything. So that being said, what we're going to talk about is AI is being sold as a salvation. Climate change AI, healthcare AI, poverty AI, loneliness, AI girlfriend. And yet inequality rises, labor power drops, and billionaires get richer. So my first question to you, Paris, is, why do people want to believe AI will fix structural problems?
I think it makes the problems seem easier to solve, right? Because if you think about the problems that we face, many of the ones that you just named, but even bigger problems as well, these are the result of decisions that have often been made over many decades, and they're intensely political, right? Which means that, solving them requires going through the political system, and that can be slow, that can be difficult. It's kind of a fight of interest to see, who is going to come out on top and if we're going to actually be able to address these problems. And so you look at that and it's like, oh man, that seems so difficult. That seems so hard to, actually address these problems through. And then the tech industry comes along and says, it's okay. You don't need to worry about all this difficult kind of political nature of these problems because we're developing this technology that will solve these difficult problems for us so we can sidestep the political system. Just, give us the room that we need to do what we want. Wait a little bit because it's going to take us a little bit longer to make the technology do what we're telling you it's going to do. And then, of course, when they don't deliver, they just say, keep waiting. The next technology will deliver instead.
Yeah, and on it goes and on it goes. So another question comes down to it's always about efficiency. Why is efficiency treated as moral virtue?
It's an interesting question, right? Because, on the one hand, efficiency and that's feels like it's pretty intimately linked to productivity in the way that these people talk about it is, a very core kind of, metric of the economy, I guess, right? Companies are interested in being more productive. The government is making sure that we're more productive. And so if you look at AI in particular, they're talking about efficiency, one, because, if you're on the corporate level and you're talking about efficiency, that means reducing costs. Often that means reducing labor costs. And so it's kind of a way of saying you can get rid of workers without directly saying you can get rid of workers, which, obviously gets a lot of bosses interested in that type of technology. But unfortunately, you also see this kind of echoed on the political level too, right? And, in the United States, there was the whole Doge saga last year, that we were
worked
seeing
out
play
well.
out. Yeah, totally. So well, right? But even, beyond that, like, specific initiative, you see governments talking all the time about efficiencies, right? And trying to do things more efficiently and being able to reduce costs because, we've been in this paradigm for a long time that we should cut taxes, we should cut spending, what the government does should be cut back. I'm in Canada, right? And our government is doing the same thing where there's a lot of public servants whose jobs are being cut at the moment. And, the narrative from the government is that we're going to be able to use AI in order to deliver services better despite having fewer people. And I don't think that's really proven to be the case or that is going to happen. But I think that is obviously a powerful narrative, right? The idea that things are going to get done better, that we're going to be able to do more with less. We always kind of want that. And so the companies kind of play on it, take advantage of it, and then, get people to adopt their technologies as a result. And, I would say time and again, we often see that is not actually how things play out in practice.
Yeah, and I don't think we're seeing it play out like that now because I've seen it. It's gone into hyperdrive at this point. I remember when I made my last film, like Americon, and one of my big personalities writers I had in was Kurt Anderson, who wrote Evil Geniuses, and he threw out some numbers, and we're wow, we were way off it. We're talking about replacement numbers, replacing workers. I just don't think it's going to replace workers. That's my belief. I just don't think AI is there yet. To me, it's just. It's like having a bunch of well-trained sycophants around you.
Yeah.
And that's how I see it. Like, yeah, you're doing great, man. Perfect.
Totally.
Great job. And then I run even for this podcast, I'll run by, I'm like, hey, how does this line play out with SEO or whatever? Never gets it right. Never really gets it right. I'll test different platforms. So to me, it's never right. It's not never right, but it's not perfect. So we're not there yet.
Well, and I feel like with what you're saying, there's two pieces of it that stand out to me, right? On the one hand, if you have this like sycophantic chatbot, there's going to be a certain number of people where even if it doesn't work, particularly well, they're going to really like, having something that always confirms their biases and whatnot, that tells them what they want to hear. So they'll keep paying for it or subscribing to it or using it as a result of that. But then the other piece of what you're saying is like, around the jobs is I agree with you. And one of the things that really like, I don't know if the right word would be like radicalized me on the tech industry or whatnot, but we could at least say like open my eyes to what was going on, right? Was really in the 2010s when, there was a big narrative at that time as well that new robotics, self-driving cars, AI were going to, again, like eliminate up to half of all jobs was the narrative at the time, right? The idea was that self-driving cars were going to make it so you wouldn't need truck drivers or taxi drivers or any of these people anymore. And then all the kind of jobs that are related to that would be going away as well. And so the question was like, oh, what are all these people going to do then? Are we going to need a basic income because such a large segment of the population is going to be without work? And then you fast forward to like closer to the end of the decade, and it becomes very clear that the self-driving cars haven't arrived, that the robotics is not playing out in the way that they suggested, that the AI is not as powerful as, they were making it seem as though, and you were not having this mass destruction of jobs. What you were actually having in many cases was these companies rolling out new technologies that were giving them more power over the workers that they already had, right? So forms of algorithmic management where your work is managed through a platform where you don't have an easy access to a manager or a boss. We see that play out through like Uber and gig economy apps where, your work is mediated through an app and you don't really have, an easy way to talk to a human if something goes wrong. Or on the flip side, you have something like Amazon where, okay, yeah, these are employees in the warehouses, but their work is managed through, basically these scanners that they use to scan the items. And because of the systems that Amazon has rolled out, the productivity targets are so high that these people are forced to work so fast that they have, a level of injuries at work that is far and above other kind of workplaces in that sector. And so, so we have like the narrative that, okay, the AI or the new technology is going to destroy all these jobs. And then as we see time go on, we see, okay, it's not destroying the jobs, but it's changing the jobs such that the work becomes harder. It's easier for the workers to be reclassified as contractors or just to have their union efforts kind of broken, right? Because if you think of logistics like warehousing, this is a sector that's traditionally unionized in the United States, that provides a good job and a good living. And, an Amazon warehouse doesn't do that at all, right? And it has vigorously fought to stop unions from taking hold there. So for me, it was like a real moment of saying like, okay, the industry is promising one thing, but what they're actually delivering is something very, very different. And so then when I look at what's happening with generative AI now, and I see the talk of like destroying all the jobs and all that kind of stuff, I'm like, okay, that's what they're saying, but what are they really doing, right? Like, what is this? How is this really going to play out? And I think in that sense too, you see, again, it's unlikely to destroy all these jobs, but they're certainly going to try to change jobs such that workers have less power and less income as a result of it.
Yeah. I always look at things in a sort of a historical look. I was trying to think like, has technology ever solved inequality without changing power? Can you think of any examples? I couldn't really come of anything,
For
right?
me, and the way I see it is that, technology is not an inherently bad thing,
No.
right? I think technology can be used for great purposes. And we have certainly seen that through human history. But to me, I feel like when the benefits of technology are broadly kind of shared and broadly felt, are when the technology is also paired with a political program to deliver that, right? It's not just like developed by a company and the company puts it out into the world and then magically it benefits everybody. It's like, I think back of like even the early days of like rolling out vaccines,
Yeah.
or rolling out like sewage systems or something like that. Like sewers existed, but you weren't going to have them put throughout a city without the government stepping in and saying, okay, we are doing this for hygiene reasons because, I'm sure it's also good for the economy and all that kind of stuff, right? But it would never have happened without there being a political program associated with it as well. Same with vaccines. And so that is where I'm like, that the industry wants us to think that just because they release this product, everyone is going to benefit or what. That's the narrative that they want to sell us. But that's not, I feel like that's not the experience that we have seen for the past while.
No, but my one hope for this is when I look back at history, like we look at the Industrial Revolution and that sparked the labor movement
Totally.
because it was the same thing. Like everyone's productivity went up, but conditions were as bad or even worse. But it sparked a labor movement, and that's the way I look at this. I'm hoping we're going to see more of that because a big part of my last film was following Chris Smalls around, while he was unionizing Amazon. I was like, oh, maybe this is it. Maybe this is a tipping point because I'm always looking for tipping points. Where are people finally going to draw the line? Like, all right, we've had enough of this. Enough of this bullshit. Like, let's solve this problem. So I'm hoping maybe something of a labor, like another surge in the labor movement comes out. I mean, I have good feelings about it. I see a lot of activity, especially in the United States. If this isn't late stage capitalism, I don't want to see what late stage capitalism is because, we're there.
Totally. And it feels like in the United States, if you're going to have something that is going to push back against what's happening now, like it has to be a labor movement or something like that, right? Like,
Yeah.
just to add on to what you're saying, like there's the Amazon Labor Union, which is obviously one, kind of really hopeful aspect of this, what they were doing. For me, obviously one of my interests has been in transportation. And so that's obviously looking a lot at the gig economy companies and stuff too. There's been a lot of organizing around Uber, Lyft, the gig platforms, the food delivery platforms. New York is a real center for that, but you see a lot of that in Europe as well, where they have fought really aggressively for better regulations of this sector. And in some countries have really pushed that really far. If you look at Spain, for example, has moved really far on this. But then the other thing that I would add, if we're thinking about organizing as well, is there's the labor piece, but I think there's also the like community piece and the broader organizing piece. And one of the things that is related to like the AI story that actually gives me a lot of hope right now is seeing the growing organizing and just like community pushback and anger around the big data centers that are being rolled out in so many communities across the United States, right?
Yeah, that's a good point too. And things like the robo taxis, like I was just living in Austin for like 7 years, and that was a test bed for them all. And it was comical. I mean, it was absolutely comical. Like when they'd all get backed up into like a street, like you just had a laugh. You're like, this is ridiculous. And I wouldn't mind if they had done something, like with come on, the Schwarzenegger, with the Johnny Cat. What's wrong with me? I'll come back to that.
That's all right. Well, a friend of mine in LA told me, he was like, because I guess they introduced the robo taxis there like last year or something, and he was like, or maybe it was before that. Anyway, but he was telling me, he was like, I don't know why, but they just keep coming down my street.
Oh, they do. And it's funny, in Austin, you'd see them everywhere. And you're like, oh, no, I'm stuck behind a robo-cab, and you see the guy like sitting in the other seat. And I'm like, no, not the robo-cab. Yeah.
I even feel that a bit with like the Teslas. Like when I see a Tesla driving around, sometimes I'm a bit nervous that like they're on the autopilot and like, how's it going to work kind of a thing,
Or it might just burst into flames.
Yeah, that too.
It could just do that. That Elon extra feature.
Special feature. You pay extra for that one. Yeah.
Exactly. So, all right. So we're going to move on. And all right. So so at this point, we're like automating labor and we're not automating leadership. Then what exactly is a CEO doing that can't be automated? So this is a thing I don't understand, Paris, is I look at AI, right? And like, I see it would be better at a like a CEO's job or something. Cause it's just crunching numbers. Mm-hmm. Like it's going to look at trends, patterns. And that's something it does well. And I just don't get it. So why don't you think it could automate a CEO's job?
I think it definitely could, but they don't want us to think about that, right?
No, they don't, right?
Yeah. I feel like, so I have 2 lines of thought on this. First of all, is like the CEOs, like, obviously they're not going to try to automate themselves. They're getting paid so much money to like, denigrate the broader workforce and to try to drive so much investment into the companies with these hype cycles of which generative AI is the most recent one. So obviously they, want to stay where they are. But like, I'm sure you could easily get, a chatbot to figure out how to get rid of as many workers as possible. And it would come up with a plan to do that. I'm sure there's not any kind of restriction on them that would stop them from doing that piece. But then the other piece is that I feel like one of the things we've actually seen at the tech companies that have engaged in a lot of layoffs, since kind of the AI moment, is that a lot of those layoffs were actually targeted, not wholly, not exclusively, but there was a lot of targeting at like middle management and that kind of area to kind of gut that. I don't know, like, I'm sure you could argue that like an AI can be used to do the manager's job or whatever. But to me, it feels a bit more like these are companies that feel, whether or not it's true or not, that their headcount grew too large and AI became a justification for them to really just start like, taking a hacksaw and just cutting off parts of the company to try to reduce headcount and reduce cost as a result to please shareholders, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's the one thing I still understand. I mean, of course they're calling the shots, so they're never going to have it take their job. But if I was a shareholder meeting, I was like, well, how can I save $40 million by having an AI CEO?
Yeah.
It's funny, by the way, just to interject this, I was reading a story today, and I think it was in Forbes or something, but I guess like OpenAI was saying that ChatGPT, they recently had like 500,000 cases of like possible psychosis.
Yeah, okay.
And I was like, whoa.
They actually put a number on it.
Yeah, they said it was around 500,000. I'll find that article. I think I still have it up somewhere. But I was like, whoa. Because I was thinking of it from my end, how sometimes I have it go through my work and format scripts or whatever I'm doing, help me with graphics. And I'll sit there and like, oh, thanks, buddy. It's not your buddy, man.
Yeah, well, it stood out to me as well, like, if we're thinking about OpenAI in particular, I believe it was last year sometime, they had planned to kind of phase out this model that was ChatGPT 4.0, which was apparently like, very good to use to, create a bot that was seeming like it was your friend or that you could have a relationship with or something like that. And there were a bunch of people who, have developed this dependence on the chatbot who kind of freaked out when the company announced that it was going to phase this model out. And ultimately it brought it back because of, the number of people who were angry and distressed because it had taken away this model that was like the foundation of the like AI friend or girlfriend or boyfriend or whatever that they had like put together. But then recently I read that OpenAI was phasing it back out because I think they had realized that like the degree of dependence that these people had developed on to like the model was actually a real risk, in the sense that, you were basically having all these people kind of lose their minds because of the dependence on the chatbot. And, which goes to the psychosis point that you're mentioning. But like, I think that this is like a really under-discussed topic that the companies are really going to have to face up to in the coming years.
I mean, that's why I looked it up, and it was, I think that it was an article that was out today. I think it was out today. And I was like, oh, hey, someone wrote about it. And they said they threw out that number, like 500,000. They didn't put a precise number on it. But, and the interesting thing too is, like, I'm going a little off topic where I wanted to go, but just talking about OpenAI, and it's another thing. I had Barry Ritholtz on my show, and, I had to ask him because, look, the stock market makes no sense to me. Like, I don't understand evaluations. Like, I was like, can you explain why Tesla is worth $1 trillion? But so it's the same thing with AI. I saw ChatGPT. I'm like, this is it. This is their product. They don't have any other products, right? And so I look at, and the Chinese are aping it every turn. They're like, okay, and they just rolled it out. It's like, all right, here's DeepSeek, and it's free, you know? And so you just keep seeing this. And so I just want to talk about that just real quick, is like a bubble. I mean, do you see that coming?
Totally.
Yeah,
the finances make no sense here, right? Like,
it doesn't make any sense to me.
The companies are spending, I can't remember the exact figure off the top of my head, but like the major tech companies just announced that it's like hundreds of billions of dollars. Like, I think it's over $600 billion that they're planning to spend on data centers this year alone, which is just like insane, right?
It's unbelievable.
Yeah, and they're not making the money. Like, I can't remember the figures exactly for OpenAI at the moment, but like they lost tons of money last year. They're projected to continue to lose tons of money in the years to come. And it's really not clear where they're supposed to be like making their profits off of ChatGPT. They just introduced like ads on certain tiers, but like that's not going to get you to the amount of money that they supposedly need to pay for all of this computation that, they need to run the models. And we can be quite certain that Microsoft and Google are not making money off of this either, but they just have other massive businesses that they can use to subsidize it, right?
Yeah.
Like, it just doesn't make any sense. We see like Oracle is struggling because Oracle was going big on data centers, and it's not clear, OpenAI was supposed to be their major customer, and it's not clear they can actually pay for all the data center capacity. There's other kind of companies like in the wider market that there are questions about, and like financiers and all this kind of stuff. Like, it just doesn't make any sense at the end of the day. And like, it seems inevitable that it's going to crash at some point. The question is just like, what does the crash look like? Is it kind of like just falls off a cliff, or does it kind of like peter out over time? And that those are like the type of things that remain to be seen. Like, I don't feel confident calling like a bubble bursting at a certain time. Because there's so many different factors that go into it, right? There's money coming from so many different places. Investor confidence is a big piece of this. Like, one of the things that's driving up the values of all these companies is just because of hype and investor confidence. And also, like, when there's so much money put into it, if then you question the confidence of it or question whether there's ever going to be a payoff, then your chance at getting your money back in the future goes off a cliff when the whole market falls, right? And so, like, I think there's enough people who have put money into this that they don't want it all to fall. It's similar, like you mentioned Tesla, right? Tesla's valuation makes absolutely no sense for the company as it is, but you have a bunch of people who have bought into it, who really believe in Elon Musk, who don't want to like lose their shirts on the money that they put into Tesla. And so it's just kind of like, we need to keep believing that he's going to pull off this trillion robots or whatever he's building now, which makes no sense. But if we question it, then the money's all gone, right? It's wild.
Well, that's how I look, because I mean, all these people have sunk at least $1 trillion into AI at this point? Are we around that figure?
It's low. It's like if you're looking at just this year's 600 billion and last year was like 3 or 400 or something like
yeah,
that.
so
Like
it's well over a
yeah.
trillion. So these people have $1 trillion on their line. So one of two things will happen is someone's going to figure out how to make it pay, or two, taxpayers are going to end up bailing them out again, like in 2008. That's what's
And
going to happen.
OpenAI has like explicitly said that, and then they kind of like backtracked on it when people freaked out. But, one of their people explicitly said that they were hoping the government would step in if something went awry, right? Yeah.
Of course. Yeah. They hate socialism till they need it. They all do. They all hate it till they need it. All right. So there's a couple of things I wanted to talk about too that you might be able to help understand and unpack for me. When people say AI is biased, what are they usually missing? Or what does that mean? And what are they missing? I mean, if you could clarify that.
Sure thing. Yeah. So as far as I would understand it, basically what you're talking about when you're talking about the bias of AI is often on the training data, right? What this model is actually trained on that leads to the types of outputs that it's creating, right?
Yep.
So, basically these companies have gone out there and collected a whole load of data, and that data can have biases built into it. And so we've seen this with like image models in the past where, it will often be like overtrained, if we want to put it that way, on images of white people, on images of women as well, on images of women that look a certain way, often women in kind of more sexualized poses, sexualized positions. And then that's the type of image that it will kind of generate when you ask it to generate an image of a woman, because those are the types of images that have been put into the training data, right?
You know what kills me though? That's like, it sounds like a tech bro made it.
Totally. Well, it's like,
sorry to interrupt you, but
no,
it's like,
absolutely. But it's like, I can't remember it now, but like there's this like image that is like the foundation of image recognition or something like that. And it's basically an image from Playboy back in like the 70s or 80s or something like that. Like, it's like built into the very foundations of like the whole thing, But so there's that piece of it, right? The training data that has gone into training the models. But then there's also like what you're doing with the models once they have been created, or with the kind of chatbots and whatnot that you're building on top of the models. And so, you can look at a chatbot like Grok, for example, the one that is built into X and XAI. And in that case, Elon Musk is explicitly saying that he wants to create an anti-woke kind of AI and stuff like that. And so the kind of like safeguards that they're putting on the model, the way that they are, shaping the kind of outputs of it is not solely in the training data, but is also in the way that they're then shaping what comes of it, right? So obviously the recent example is when they took the restrictions off on, kind of nudity and that kind of stuff, and, created a whole scandal at the beginning of this year. But, there's also, there's credible reporting, I guess I would put it that way, that Grok is like overtrained on Elon Musk's tweets and is kind of designed to reflect the views of Elon Musk. And so, that's all in there as well.
Terrible.
Yeah.
I mean, like, how many films were we warned about this in books and everything? Like, he's living it out. He's like a supervillain. He really is.
Yeah.
He really is a supervillain.
It's quite like, especially thinking of like a film or like, a narrative, like it's quite a journey that he's gone on to being like, you think like 15 years ago and he was like creating the future and, this man who was bringing us to Mars and making the electric cars and saving the world. And now it's like, he is like the supervillain. Yeah.
Yeah. I never bought into him in any step of the way. I never bought into him ever. And it's weird, the cult of personality, how bad it is now. It's in this age, I think it's even worse.
Well,
Trump
I feel like
Musk and these guys, like, I mean, you must get it all the time. You must have got a lot from the Elon bros, like probably coming at you. I mean, I used to get it when I was still on Twitter or X. I left after he got it. I was like, I'm done with this platform. But
totally.
I used to get it anytime, I got ripped, he blocked me, like, and I used to get it from all those guys. They'd all like, oh, he's a genius, this and that. You're just jealous. And I'm like, dude, he doesn't give a shit about you. Okay.
Totally. And I feel like at this point too, like if you're still buying into like the cult of personality of Elon Musk, then like you really need to be diehard, right? Like you need to be willing to like
he's not even
let
cool.
so many things go. Exactly, right? Like you just have to have like blind faith, adherence, whatever we want to call it, in this man, and be like, all the negative stuff he's doing, whatever. I have justified that in my mind, and I'm just like buying whatever it is he's saying at this point, which is wild to me.
hopefully self-destructs at some point.
Oh my God, I hope
He
so.
he has all the markers for that
Yeah.
self-destruct. So
Well, it
let's
almost
hoping on
looked like
that.
he was doing that like a year or so ago when you
Yeah,
look at
with the
like
Doge
the
thing.
totally. Yeah, but and you
Yeah,
look at like the drug use and how he just seemed to be like completely off his
he
head
was
all the
out of his
time. Like
mind. Yeah,
totally. Yeah.
he was out of his mind. Yeah, jeez. Oh, he's such a freak of nature.
Yeah.
So just staying on the sort of this AI as an advocate of capitalism, like how does training AI on capitalist data lock in capitalist outcomes? I mean,
Well, it's kind of there's like different points of view on the technology, right?
yeah.
And my kind of view is that the technology itself is inherently political in some ways, right? Because I think that something like generative AI only arises when you have a certain set of factors that kind of, all converge to be able to enable this technology to exist. So, on the one hand, you have this business model that kind of Silicon Valley digital tech companies have been built on, which was essentially established in like the early 2000s, where it's based on this kind of mass collection of data in order to create advertising profiles and kind of recommendation systems on the wider public. And of course, we know also how that system is very useful to, government intelligence and surveillance agencies through the Snowden leaks and things like that.
Hmm.
But essentially they create this kind of mass network of surveillance of data collection that other actors are then able to jump on top of. But it also means that, the amount of data that is collected, that is created, is just extreme. And it's not just online. It's, as these technologies have proliferated out into physical space, there's all this additional data that is created and that they are trying to collect, right? Like one of the examples that we don't often talk about, but is like all of our cars are pretty much connected now and creating data all the time and sending that to tech companies if you're using the Android Auto or the CarPlay, but also to the automakers, and the automakers are reselling that data onto other people who want to buy it, and they're pretty indiscriminate about who they'll sell it to because they just want to make money. Like it's just one example, right? So there's data created in all these spaces. Then paired with that, so you have this massive amount of data, right? And then paired with that is also the centralized computation. So again, around the same time, 2006, 2008, these major tech companies, Amazon, Microsoft, Google in particular, are still starting to build out the cloud, right? Which are these, now we see these massive data centers. They weren't as big at the time. But now there's these kind of networks of massive data centers built around the world that are controlled by a small number of massive companies that give them an amount of computational power, which is hard to imagine, right? But that they control it all under their own roof. And then paired with that, of course, is just the fact that these are massive companies that have an amount of capital that is hard to actually imagine. And without that kind of set of factors, you really cannot build generative AI in the way that these companies have built it. You require the absolutely enormous amount of data. You require the enormous amount of computational power that these companies have built in order to train these models because they're so large. And you need all that money to make it all work, right? It's very expensive. A smaller company, it's very difficult for them to move into these markets. And so in that way, it's like the technology is in part a product of the kind of social and economic relations that we have in the society. And thus, in my view, is as a result of that, is kind of reflective of it and then reflects it back at us in a sense, right? Especially when we see then the ways that the technology is deployed. You're trying to reduce the power of labor. You're trying to make it so that the companies are more powerful as a result. Like all these sorts of things. Like it feels kind of built into the technology, the kind of ramifications of how it then pervades society.
Yeah, that's how we were talking about like ChatGPT, and I was like, it's a poor business model to me. It's to me, it's anything like the atom bomb or the Maxim machine gun or the Browning rifle. That like there's a great story. It's like, so once a toothpaste is out of the tube, you're screwed. So
Yeah.
like there's a story, and it was funny. It just came to my head today. I haven't thought about this in years, but during World War I, the Americans created the first automatic, like assault rifle, the Browning, that was later used in World War II. But they didn't want to bring it to World War I because they were scared the Germans would capture it and replicate it. I mean, that's how things were back then. And I was like with this, I'm like, dude, you guys, the toothpaste out of the tube, everyone's going to be replicating your AI everywhere. It's like, if you have
Totally.
the infrastructure, it's done.
Yeah.
So yeah, it just kind of made me laugh. I was just trying to think of like where was someone, and it was the one protective thing I could think of was the Browning assault rifle. the BAR as they called it. But
Well,
I was
I feel
like
like there
thinking
was a
about that.
story too. Maybe this is just a myth that like I heard sometime, but like apparently like way back, China invented these technologies that were like way ahead, and they were
Yeah.
like, they were like, this is too risky. Like, let's just destroy them because we can't have this spread. So sort of
Well,
a thing.
China pretty much invented everything.
Yeah.
One of my favorite all-time series, and if you ever watch it, it was Connections with James
Okay.
Burke. It's like and he just ties how everything's connected, like from money lending to the launch of Apollo 11. And James Burke is just wonderful. And the first series in 1979, and he connects all these dots, and he talks about technology and how
Yeah.
they sprung from different events. It's the most, and it's still it still works from 1979, though he did a new one. He's in his 90s and just did a new
No
one.
way.
I still haven't seen it yet, but I gotta watch it. But I highly
Cool.
recommend Connections. It's like, it'll change your life. It is a little creepy because he starts the whole series on the top of the World Trade Center.
No way.
Right. And then, so he's talking about the blackout of 1965. So he uses it. It's like, what caused it was like this relay trip, and it caused the blackout in New York. But he showed how it just shut down a whole city. One little part shut down the largest city in the world. He's like, all right, it's done. And so he's on top of the World Trade Center. And then, so he goes these different examples, like he takes real people and what they were doing at that point, like, oh, they were stuck on the subway, whatever, and they're reenacting the scenes. And the flight, like it's from like Air Sweden or something flying over, and the flight's number 9/11. I kid
No
you
way.
not. I kid you not. I never noticed it till I rewatched it like in the early 2000s, because I finally got a copy of it, and I was like, oh my God, that's
Yeah.
crazy. On the World Trade Center, it's probably 9/11. Sorry, I got off topic there, but
Wow. No, that's all right.
it's a great show to connect, it's called Connections, to connect how we've gotten to this technological trap. That's what he basically says. How have
Yeah.
we, because he's like, okay, your power goes out. How are you going to get food? Like, all right, you have to plow a field, you got to rig a plow and harness, and all this sort of stuff. So it's like we built ourselves this giant technological trap. And he's not
Totally.
preaching against science. He's definitely a guy of science, but
Well, and if it's in the 70s too, like, Lewis Mumford would be writing about that around the same time.
yeah,
and
exactly.
Yeah.
And James Burke, he was legendary. Like, his coverage of the Apollo moon landings is like legendary. If you ever rewatch his stuff for BBC, it's like he's just brilliant. He's so great. But anyways, before, I don't want to run out of time because
That's all right.
I got a few more questions for you.
Yeah.
Okay. So, all right. So AI decision making it's often opaque, even to its its creator. It's like it's an invisible hand. It's automated. Why is opacity such a feature, not a bug of AI systems?
It's a good question. Like, I think
Yeah,
part
that's
of
why
it
I
is
asked you. I
yeah,
didn't
of
know.
course. No, I think part of it is that certainly the companies want to keep this stuff secret, right? They don't
Yeah.
want to give out their kind of secret sauce to their competition. Like, there was a story just the other day that Anthropic was kind of freaking out
Yes.
because Chinese AI companies were kind of pinging its Claude model to figure out kind of what it was saying about different things. And it was really funny because they were like, oh, they're stealing from us. And it's like, yeah, well, you stole from all of us, so we don't really care, right?
And everyone
Because they
stole from
stole all this
China.
data.
Everyone stole from the rear post rudder. You could go down printing everything.
Totally. Yeah. So there's that piece of it, right? And like, I think there's parts of it where certainly they don't want like researchers to be able to really go in there and understand what is happening. They don't want regulators to be able to do the same thing. But the other piece is they also don't really want us to know what exactly is in their training data, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so like, even when you have these discussions about like open source AI models, because if you go in certain segments of like the technology communities, they'll say like, okay, these big proprietary models, these big closed models owned by companies like Google or OpenAI or whatnot, they're bad. But if we have open source models, then they're good. And usually in the case of like an open source tech product, you would assume that means that all the code is shared, that you can basically see and play around with everything inside it. But often when it comes to these open source AI models, you're not able to see exactly what it is trained on. You might get a little kind of description that gives some idea of it, but you can't actually see the training data itself, which is why people call them open weights often instead of open source. You can see the weighting, but not actually where the training data comes from. But yeah, it's like the kind of opacity, the secrecy is just kind of built into the core of it, which if you think of the name OpenAI, is completely counter to what the company initially said it was setting out to do. It said it was setting out to be open, to do this stuff in the open, to share this stuff with everybody. And then Sam Altman clearly decided there was a different set of priorities at play there.
You think?
Yeah.
Yeah. So like, I'm always trying to think of like Bigfoot metaphors and everything. The one I thought like, about the clarity of it all is like, so you never see Bigfoot clearly, and you never see who's responsible when an algorithm denies housing, credit, or healthcare, any of those sort of things. So I said they're kind of similar. It's the one Bigfoot thing Bigfoot has in common with like AI and reasoning like that, because I'm pretty sure AI is doing all that stuff now.
It also makes it easier for them.
Dies.
Totally. It also makes it easier for them to like make these big claims about the AI and stuff too, right? To say that it's going to have these kind of world transformative properties and whatnot. There was a study or a research paper or something that was published by OpenAI, I believe it was last September, where they actually admitted that what they call hallucinations, the kind of false information that is outputted by these models, is actually like a core feature of it. It's not something that you can get rid of, that you can fix. Because from the early days, they were saying like, yeah, but as it gets better, we will be able to kind of work the hallucinations out of the models and it will be accurate and blah, blah, blah. And this study was basically admitting, the company itself was admitting that is not going to happen, that the hallucinations are part of how these things work. Because they're like, if you think about it, there's not like an understanding, right? Like, it's not learning that something is real. It's just like predicting the right response based on the prompt that you give it, based on the training data that it has. And so there's no kind of like filter for accuracy because there's no thought behind it, even though the companies occasionally try to present it.
Well, the next questions I have, they're kind of, I don't know, nebulous or philosophical, and I don't know if they really have answers, but you might have a grasp of this. So are there any problems like that algorithms you don't think could solve? Like AI algorithm, like, is there anything you don't think, like at this point, because who knows what the future is, but I'm just saying in the present time, is there anything you think it's not going to handle, a problem it can't handle?
Yeah, I would say I'm skeptical of a lot of things that it can do.
Me too. I am too.
Yeah. And I think just to make a general point before talking about specifics, I would say that I think right now the kind of form of generative AI that we have, or maybe not so much the form, but the way that the companies have rolled it out is such that the cost of using it is heavily subsidized at the moment, right? Because we talked about how they're losing just like immense amounts of money to try to push this technology into so many different spaces. And I think that leads to companies, but also individuals trying to use it for things that it is certainly not well suited to be used for. And so we're seeing it trying to be applied in many different areas where it doesn't make sense to apply it. We're already seeing some companies pull back from it because they're not seeing like the cost savings or the benefits that are coming from it. But especially when the cost has to more reflect, like the price of the service has to more reflect the cost of delivering it, then I think we'll start to see that kind of shake out even more with companies and individuals kind of saying like the cost doesn't make sense here for what I'm doing with it, because there might only be certain more niche applications than what the companies want to suggest right now. But if we're talking about like specifics, I think there are two things that immediately come to mind when I heard your question, right? And the first, and I have like specific people who came to mind as well.
Okay.
And the first is around creativity, right? And the person who came to mind there was really Ursula K. Le Guin, the American author, right?
Wonderful.
And she has this like wonderful essay. I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head, but like it's about technology. I think it's actually called A Rant About Technology. And she is basically like going in on this notion that technology is always like, the biggest new systems, like, right now it would be the massive generative AI models or something like that. And actually technology can be very mundane things as well. And we kind of need to go back to recognizing that. And she gave this great speech near the end of her life where she was talking about not wanting to see American literature sold downstream, because of capitalism, but also because of technology in many instances. And for me, I think that creativity, thinking about her, is certainly one of the spaces where I don't think generative AI is well suited, to be a core part of that process, right? Because for me, creativity is something that is like inherently human, is something that comes from our experiences of the world, the way that we think about things, and is very unique to that, right? And I think that if we start having creativity that is then filtered through an AI model, or where the AI model is, or like we're consuming supposed creative works that are created by AI, I just don't think that carries the same degree of like cultural and societal enrichment than having humans engaging in this kind of work, right? We used to kind of joke that like that the robots should be doing the menial tasks and we should be doing the creative stuff. And it feels like it's kind of flipping on its head. And the companies are trying to get robots to take over the creative stuff while we do all like the menial labor that is,
Yeah, exactly. I agree. It's affecting everyone. I've been in the film industry for 27 years, and you're seeing the effects of it there in a big way. And my friends in the art community, you're seeing it there. To me, it's just a tool. I use it to do simple tasks. Though I find it's starting to sound like me. Like when it spits back things, I'm like, oh my God, it's getting my humor.
Like learning from your voice or the
I think it's learning from me, which is kind of fun. But it's until like I had this idea for an invention like back in my 20s. I wanted to make like these like evil fortune cookies where if you open it, it said like, oh, you will get cancer this year or things like that. So I think if you maybe put a little negativity,
I wouldn't want to get that one at the Chinese restaurant personally.
No, but I always thought about that, like just to freak people out, is like just put some awful messages in there. So I thought the same thing with AI because it's always so fucking cheery. So it was like, hey man, this is great. You did a great job. And it's funny because I haven't really tested the bounds of it, but I was going to take some old terrible scripts that were sent to me like unsolicited and run them through there and see how it grades them. So I'm thinking about giving it a test for that because I can read them and go, this is terrible. Like, and the thing is funny. That's another little funny side story is I like bad scripts. Like I'll read them. Like I'm the only person in the film business that will read an unsolicited script because they're so bad. I just enjoy them because they're just so terrible. But I do that with films too. I like really sometimes just I have a collection of like movies you wouldn't believe. Anyways, if we could teach AI some of that, like it's and I understand, but as a tool, it should be like that. It should be like cheering you on. So that's why I only see it as a tool because it's not something I can reflect with. I can't really reflect with it. But, a lot of times it gives me good advice too. Like, I'm like, oh, especially at the podcast, you've been doing this for a while. It's like I'm learning the ins and outs. I come from a tech background, film, video background, but this is a whole new venue for me. So I've had AI has helped me a lot just figuring this out. I'm like, hey, what's the best tool for this? What's the best tool for that? And it's usually been pretty spot on. But it's simple things. I mean, I could have probably Googled that and got the same results.
Exactly. Yeah. Right? That's what I still do. Right. Yeah.
Right. I still do too. I still do too. Unless I need like long instructions. Yeah. Like the way I use it is like, for example,
still pisses me off when I have to do a Google search and the AI overview comes up. It's like, why is there not an option for me to turn this off? Like, this is ridiculous.
It's so funny. A friend of mine posted that in social media. She's like, this morning, she's like, how can I get rid of this? She goes, Google Chrome. I can't get rid of it. I'm like, just stop using Chrome, man.
Yeah.
It's like,
I've started to use a different search engine, a French one instead, just to
really?
Because I got so annoyed. Yeah. And I still use Google for some things, and I use that because it's like you learn the types of, obviously it's not as powerful as a search engine, right? It's called Quant. But there's like certain queries that it can do really well. But then there's certain like more, would you say, more in-depth things, or like, there's a bit more kind of to the search query. And it's like, okay, that's a thing that Google's going to have to handle because I don't know if this other one could do it properly,
Though it's less scary than WebMD. I'll tell you that much for healthcare things.
Of course.
Like I had this like little rash and I was like, and it said, oh, we'll take a picture of it and I'll figure out what it is. And
my God.
Yeah. It gave me a list, but the number 2 one on the list, it was right. It was just like a regular rash kind of thing.
Gotcha.
But I'm just a hypochondriac, and I was like, oh my God, do I have cancer? So that's why like I never go to WebMD because I wouldn't be able to live. All right, so I want to finish with like
Can I add one more thing before we get to your final question?
Of course you can.
I think the one other piece that really stands out to me to a place where like generative AI or even certain forms of like algorithmic decision making shouldn't be applied is in the delivery of essential services to people.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. Yeah, of course. Yes.
And we've already seen like plenty of examples of this certainly in the public sector, but also in the
Yeah.
private sector, where AI has been rolled out to supposedly make things more efficient, but then it
Yep.
results in really discriminatory impacts because you are essentially letting this computer system make decisions about people's lives, right? That can have real consequences for them, whether it's access to welfare or other kind of social benefits, whether you should get a visa or an immigration status or something like that, access to certain healthcare. These things are kind of life changing for people, right? And if you're having a computer make the decision and the algorithm isn't tuned properly, or if you're using generative AI and there's some kind of hallucination, that can completely alter a person's life without even having a human kind of review what is happening and being involved in that process. And for me, that is so. When I hear like all of these governments talking about trying to do things more efficiently and wanting to adopt AI and move it into the public sector, like I just kind of have red flags, constantly, because I'm really worried about the potential impacts that that's going to
Yeah.
have. And it's not a theoretical thing, right? It's like, in Australia, they had a huge scandal a number of years ago because the welfare system rolled out a new algorithmic decision-making system and kicked a bunch of people off of benefits. And, there was a lot of like personal harm as a result of that. And then the government years later had to pay billions in compensation, but it was like, people's lives were already destroyed
Yeah.
because of that, And it's like,
Yeah.
we've seen that in many different countries. So that's the other piece for me, is like a real worry around seeing governments really pushing this notion that AI should be everywhere, AI should be adopted, when it's really not clear to me that that is, even going to save money, but also be in the best interest of, their citizens and stuff, right?
Yeah. So the last like thread we can finish off the episode in a couple minutes is, like I did my episode on Wall Street, and like, people have always claimed, Wall Street's been democratized, which it hasn't. It's like basically 1% of the world like runs, owns Wall Street. And the internet is becoming that way. It used to be, we thought of this wonderful place, this, democratized, we're all equals and this and that. And once again, I think we're in a spot where it's not, is like, so if AI is powerful, how do we make sure power is democratic? I mean, is there any way you see to that?
It's tough, right?
Yeah.
Let's be real
That's a
about
tough
it.
nut. I mean, it's a huge
Yep.
question to ask you, I
No,
mean,
but
yeah.
it's obviously a question that I think a lot about, right?
Yeah.
But to me, I think that there's a fundamental need to take on kind of the massive companies that have been built up around the internet itself. The Amazons, the Googles, the Microsofts, even the Apples of the world, that are some of the largest companies on
Yeah.
the planet now. Meta, throw that in there too. And not only wield a huge amount of power in the United States, but also wield a lot of power around the world in places where it's even harder to hold them accountable for what they're doing, right? It's easy to pull a Mark Zuckerberg or something like that in front of Congress and, try to get some accountability. It's a lot more difficult to do that in European countries, in Canada, in even smaller countries, and to get these companies to really, be held accountable and even abide by local laws. And I think that this has even become a bigger issue in light of the kind of alliance between Silicon Valley and Donald Trump and the Trump administration, and the way that we see the Trump administration using American power, to benefit the tech companies, right? And so for me, I think it's time to, one, really question like the foundations that kind of the business models of the internet were built on in the late
Mhm.
90s and early 2000s that created these companies. But also I think it's time for, one, obviously people should be experimenting, trying new things, trying new platforms, trying new tech services, trying to do something different. But I think that will work for a certain number of people, but there are also a lot of kind of less technically savvy people who will not be able to make a jump like that on their own. And that is where I think that there is actually a role. And I don't know if this so much counts or works for the United States because of its kind of political nature, or maybe it's more like on a state level or something like that. But I think certainly in other countries around the world, there needs to be more of an effort to develop more and like basically have the government kind of fund and resource the development of more kind of domestic technology, technology that's not solely oriented around turning a profit, that, thinks about what social benefit out of technology is actually going to look like. And I think that would at least result in some really kind of like fruitful experimentation to think about other ways that digital technology could work that would likely be better for the public than what we have been kind of given to use at the moment, right? So I think that there's like there's a lot to be disappointed about and worried about in this moment, but I also think that there's a lot of opportunity and a lot of things to potentially be excited about as well. And I would like to see us trying to seize on those things and, trying to experiment more, trying to do different things because I think that there's a lot we can do in this moment. And, for all the harm and all the bad that has come of the power of Silicon Valley and the power of the Trump administration, it has at least opened a lot of people's eyes to what the tech industry is doing, certainly what the political right in the United States is doing, but also what has come of that alliance. I think it's time to seize on that and try to do something different.
Yeah, I see it. I think we've come like full circle where, heading into the second industrial revolution where everything hit the fan and Teddy Roosevelt, became the big trust buster and had to bust everything up. And, we did it again this, late 70s with Bell, we broke
Totally.
up, made all the baby bells. And I think that has to be the solution. But we're in such late stage capitalism. There's no oversight. Literally, there's nothing to hold them accountable to. If you have money, you don't face any consequences, nothing. Like these congressional hearings to me are like a joke. It's like they sit there and they grill them, then they don't do anything. It's like, oh, I got to sit. I'm like, why do I have to watch this? It's going to be the same shit again. But, at some point, people are going to get fed up. I mean, the thing is like Americans have such a high tolerance for like bullshit. It's like in other countries, like they wouldn't put up with this, but here, it's
I wish, I hope. Yeah.
Yeah.
We put up with a lot of bullshit too, unfortunately.
Yeah, you do. But it's, here it's, it's hyperdrive. I mean, you look at every, from, the top down on everything here. It's just, it's depressing, but I've been feeling positive lately. Like I know there's 77 million idiots in this country that were never going to change their minds. They're still going to, be wearing adult diapers, and things like that and wearing the ridiculous Trump outfits and flags everywhere. But though I think once he dies, I think that will dissipate. That will dissipate. And then
Hopefully.
and then it'll be like, I never voted for him. It'll be like Hitler. Same thing. Nazis? I never voted for those guys. But so, that's my other worry. That's why I wanted to kind of finish off with like, where we are as, democratizing the internet again. Cause I loved it. I was, I'm an early proponent. I had a CompuServe address, that's how far back I go, So, I was like, no one else, not one of my friends was on the, I was like the only one on the internet, It's like, yeah, there's my CompuServe address. It's like 13 inches long. But well, anyways, Paris, thanks for coming on, man. You were great. You're
Absolutely.
Everything I expected, and I really appreciate it. And I'll definitely have you back again if you'll come on.
Of course. Yeah, it was great to talk.
Maybe we'll get a panel.
There we go.
All right. Have a good one, Paris.
You too.
Okay, bye. Here's the takeaway. AI isn't a savior. It's a mirror. And right now it reflects a system that automates labor, protects power, accelerates inequality. The Sasquatch paradox isn't that AI doesn't work. It's that it works exactly as designed. Waiting for AI to fix capitalism is like waiting for Bigfoot to unionize Amazon. If we want a better future, we don't need smarter machines. We need braver politics. Thank you for watching, and please subscribe, follow, like, and give me 5 stars if you can. Bye.